All right, so the aim of the presentation, as I have here, is to have a better understanding of crimes committed against our children and to equip the participants with the requisite knowledge on how to protect our children. All right, so we have some key terms that we'd like to speak of. The presentation is mainly about these persons and these key terms. So we're starting off with child safety, and this area is concerned with limiting children's exposure to hazards and reducing children's risk of harm. We also have the definition of a child, and it states here it means a person who is under the age of 18 years old. Also, an adult, it means a person who has attained the age of 18 years old. And these key terms are defined by the Child Care and Protection Act, which was revised in 2009. CDA form, the CDA now has a name change, which is the CPFSA, Child Protection and Family Service Agency. They once posted this quote here, which states, "Our children are the future of our world. Our legacies will live on through them. And it is important as a society that we have the responsibility to ensure that it does everything within its power to protect and to defend the welfare of our future generation." And we'll just go right into it and speak to crimes that are frequently being committed against our children. And to top the list, we have physical abuse. Physical abuse is self-explanatory. It's like inflicting wounds uh, to children, whether you assault them, common assault, physical assault, whether it is that they are wounded or they just have some blunt force being committed against them. It's a form of abuse and it is an offense that is committed against children. We have sexual assault, and this sexual assault can come in many forms. You have grievous sexual assault, you have sexual touching, you have sexual grooming, you have rape. A point to note as it relates to rape, um, a child cannot give consent to sex. So even though you might hear a story that a child under 16 years old might say or agree with someone to have sexual intercourse with them, but under the law, a child cannot give um, a consent to having sexual intercourse with someone. So it is the responsibility of that adult to know that, look, once a child is under 16 years old, he or she cannot give any consent to have sexual intercourse, and so by virtue of the age, then you commit an offense against that child, right? And there's a difference between rape and sexual intercourse, having sex with a child under the age of 16 years old, because as the name states, having a sex with a child under the age of 16 years old, the child has to be under 16 years old, and if whether or not he or she gives consent, then it's still considered an offense. However, rape, on the other hand, has to do with having sex with a child without her consent. Right? So while having sex with a child under 16-year-old, the child can agree to have sex. Rape is, on the other hand, is where the child did not give any consent towards sex. You might having forcefully have sex with her, and so it is considered as a different offense. All right. Next, we have abduction. We see where for the past month or so forth, some weeks now, we've been having an increase in the number of children being abducted. For example, in the parish of, I think it's St. Thomas, where there might be a serial abductor in that parish. We have seen where it was really popular on the social media platforms, and the responses has been good in terms of broadcasting and you know the combination of partnership between different stakeholders to try and get a hold of the children and to try and find them and stuff like that. So the response has been good so far, but it is a sore problem as it relates to child abduction. So once perpetrators see the opportunity to take a child, then they will go for it. All right, so we're moving on to robbery and theft. This is normally committed on mostly teenagers because you normally find that these are the groups with high-tech cell phones and expensive gadgets. And so we find that among teenage age groups, this is quite prevalent. We also have child abuse and neglect. It can range from any age group, from an infant or onwards. And this normally happens in and around our communities. And we urge that people continue to look out for these activities. Sexual grooming, as we spoke about earlier, this is when someone basically is trying to is when a person engages in a predatorship manner to conduct or to prepare a child or a young person for sexual activities at a later time. So they will want to start to groom them so that when they probably get a little bit older, they, they have their intentions set up right out. And so that when they get a little bit older, they'd like to carry out their intentions. And so that's what we call sexual grooming. And so this sexual grooming, it includes communicating and or attempting to befriend or establish a relationship or an emotional connection with the child or the parent. And so child groomers, they will often provide the child or parents with gifts. They'll give them special attention. They will even make close physical contact with them. It might be sexual, such as they might tickle the child, openly play with them, accidentally touching them in their private area. That's pretending that it was an accident. They might expose themselves to the child, like expose themselves in the nudity state and pretend as if, oh, it's an accident and it wasn't supposed to happen, when in fact they are trying to groom the child, right? So they also try to control the child through threats or force and their use of authority. And for an offense of sexual grooming, it is a really heavy punishment, and we're seeing on the Sexual Offense Act, it the punishment for which has a term not exceeding 15 years. So it's a very serious offense that is committed against our children, one that is not normally observed readily, but it has been happening. And so normally sexual offenses against our children are born out of this activity that is. A little bit more on sexual grooming. It says that here under I think this is the Sexual Offences Act, an adult commits the offense if A, having met or communicated with a child on at least 2 earlier occasions, he or she intentionally meets the child or travels with the intention of meeting the child in any part of the world. Section 6 states the child is under the age of 16. Section 6, subsection C states that at the time of meeting or travel, he or she intends to do anything to or in respect of the child during or after the meeting or in any part of the world which, if the act were done in Jamaica, would amount to the commission by any person of a sexual offense under the Sexual Offences Act. Also, Part 2 states it does not reasonably believe that the child is of or over the age of 16. So you know that children might appear to be a little bit more mature than they look. And so you have to have a reasonable belief that the child is not over the age of 16. So you have to prove that point then to get a conviction basically under the act. Going into some statistics as it relates to crime committed against our children, looking at this figure, I got this statistic from the formerly known as CDA, the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, and it shows that the figure shows that the number of children who are victims of violent crimes in Jamaica, and we're seeing some a bit of fluctuation and in the numbers here for 2017. It has 481 children who were reported victims of serious crimes, of which 55 of these children were murdered. In 2018, we're seeing where it shows an increase in the number of serious crimes, and that accounts for an 8% increase from the previous year. We have seen in 2019 where it spiraled down, and so we're happy for that. Also, now we are seeing where abduction rates are massively increasing. A lot of children are going missing, and so it is a big cause for concern in this time. I have another quote here. It speaks to protecting our children, and it says the job of protecting kids most often falls to parents and caregivers, and it is up to them to familiarize themselves with safety risks in and around their homes and communities. Once you know the risk, you can take steps to plan for their safety. So you have to basically know your environment, know the community that you live in. Say the community is basically known for predators lurking who take advantage of children sexually. Say the community is known for gangsters who might want to get children involved in criminal activities from a younger age. And so, as a parent, we have to be aware of our surroundings and know what exactly is happening so we can try and protect our children from falling prey to these activities within our communities. So, we have some basic tips for keeping our children safe, and on screen we're seeing some tips for the younger children. And so we are advising that you tell your child to avoid talking to people they don't know when you're not around. Persons normally come off as friendly just to lure children into their trap. And so when especially when adults is not around, and so you want to encourage your children, have a sit down, have a talk with them, and let them know that, look, do not entertain conversation from strangers. It is that someone asks you something while you're moving, keep moving. If you may answer, if you can answer the question, you may, but do not give off any information about any personal information such as your home, where your house is located, and stuff like that. So don't give off any personal information. Have a sit down and talk to your kids. You want to also make sure your child knows never to walk away with strangers. Right? Make sure your child understands that they should always tell you if a stranger approaches, and never to keep it a secret. Sometimes persons might take their time to approach children little by little. They might say hi today, they might say how are you tomorrow, and that's how they want to build relationship and get to know your child a little bit better, to get more information about your child, probably about your home, about your space. And so speak to your child and let them know that, look, if this happens, never entertain these conversations. All right, so you also want to encourage children, especially those going to schools and having to take public transportation. You want to encourage them to take taxis with their friends, or if you can arrange for transportation for them, someone that you trust and someone that you know, so they won't have to have the burden of trying to select transportation that they deem safe, because not all times their their judgment is okay and safe. And so you can, as a parent, go the extra mile to help them with their judgment by preventing them from having to search for taxis that they deem safe for themselves. All right. If your child gets lost, they should ask for help from a police officer, preferably, or someone at an established business place that seems legit. So you don't want them to be going around asking help or seeking assistance from someone that they don't know, someone that looks questionable. You want to go to established business places, preferably government institutions. You want to speak to someone inside who works at the institution and not just perhaps a customer, and probably get some directives, or you yourself can find out more information from the child and help her to reach he or she to reach home safely. We also have some tips for while you are with your children. It's not every time you are with your children that you might give them your full attention. And so you have to have a sit down and reason with them if anything should go wrong. These are some of the things that they must consider. So you always want to try to keep your children within your sight, or another adult side whom you may trust with your child. So when out and about visiting places, you should always arrange a meeting point. If it is that you guys get separated from each other, you at first you go to the location and you select a location that you think this is a very good location, that in the event that we shall be separated, we can meet up here. And from the moment you are separated, you don't want to give it more than 2 minutes to try and get to that location. All right. So when traveling, you ensure that you're traveling close proximity to one another. You don't be on a cell phone walking along and your child is tagging along behind you, because persons might see that as an opportunity to snatch your child away. Also, you want to go with your child into public toilets, because you know these are some of the places, hotspot places, where predators might lurk around for children. So when they see children coming around, especially without the supervision of an adult, then they might use it as an opportunity to take these kids away. Always remind your child never to talk to strangers, even if you are nearby. So some kids might feel comfortable in talking to someone because they have eye contact with their mommy and they can see their daddy from a distance, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's safe, because you can get distracted in conversations and can be lured away. And so we recommend that you don't talk to strangers even if your parents are nearby. We have some tips also for the persons who have teenagers, and we want you to speak to them about being alert at all times. Too many times we're on the road and we're seeing teenagers or even young adults basically not paying attention to their surrounding. They're just going about using their cell phones. Some of the times they bump into people just because they're using the social medias. Some of them, they're not aware of what's happening around their surroundings, especially in the audio sense, that they have music's being played in their ears, and so they have no idea of what's happening. Even if someone sights any form of danger and might be beckoning to that child that look, danger is ahead, then they won't hear because of what they have in their ears. And so it's not advisable that while traversing the public thoroughfare, you have loud music playing in your ears, because you always want to remain alert at all times so that in the event of anything, you can be able to get yourself away from any harm or any danger. So, also, if your child thinks someone is following them, they should cross the road. Try to do something to basically confirm this action, because this is a case where it doesn't only happen to children, it happens to adults as well. And I myself have been followed several times while driving my car. But one thing I've always done is I always suspect any vehicle that's traveling behind me. It doesn't matter how it looks or whatever. It doesn't matter the time of day that I'm traveling. I keep a watch out for everybody that's traveling behind me. And so I always use my rear view mirror. I think more than everybody in this world, I check my review mirror at all times. Probably every 10 seconds or 15 seconds or so, I check my review mirror. And so that's how I notice that when persons are basically following me. And what I also observe when persons are following me is perhaps it's the motor vehicle that I drive, because I guess it's a hot car and they want it and ask you. So on one occasion I observed some some, I'm not gonna call them gentlemen, some men traveling in another Toyota motor car behind me. These men were up to no good, I can tell you, based on their deportment, based on how they dress, how they present themselves, and they were actually trailing me. Um, I saw I gave them the opportunity to pass me at once, because I didn't think it was anything at first, because I was traveling a little bit slow. And so I gave them the opportunity to pass me at once. And I recognized that these persons did not want to pass me, even though I gave them the opportunity. And so I kept driving. And when I saw where I could pick up a little speed and so forth, I did. Mind you that the road is very terrible. So I had to navigate properly. And I diverted to I diverted off track, and I recognized that this vehicle was still following me. And so I took another lane to cut out to somewhere else, and I recognized that the person took the other lane opposite to me, which would have them and me also end up at the same place when we should have finished that entry area that we took. And so I recognized that this was serious. And so what I did was to take another entry lane and went back on the main thoroughfare and went into the direction of the police station. And that's when the vehicle actually stopped following me. So you always have to be alert at all times, because one thing for sure, I was not taking that person to my house, not at all. So once your instinct tell you something, go with it, because it could be happening for real. And so I said to myself, look, this person is not coming home with me, because not when I'm sleeping they want to come and probably steal my car, and it's not gonna happen. So even though I went into the direction of the police station, I stayed on the road for like 30 to 45 minutes before ensure that I checked the area properly to see that they were not in the area lurking around before I actually went home. So you have to be vigilant at all times, and you have to convey this message to your kids that when they're going about, don't just be stuck in themselves, stuck in their cell phones, and stuck in their ways. Be on the lookout for anything that might happen. You might never know who is following you. It doesn't matter who you are. Persons may not know who you are, and but they'll always try to find opportunity to come at you. Also, you want to tell them to keep their mobile phones and other valuables out of sight. Kids normally tend to show off. When I was going to school, and the first time my mom bought me a BlackBerry Curve, I think that was, and I was like, yeah, I have a BlackBerry Curve now. You want everybody to see a BlackBerry Curve and stuff like that. So you have the loudest ringtones on your cell phones, and when you always have it in your hands and stuff like that. But that's a no-no, because what this does is to attract criminals to you, and they won't stop until they get that cell phone from you. It doesn't matter how you shun them off, they will fight, and they will perhaps inflict wound to you just to be able to get what you have, because it's valuables. And don't think that they're going to keep it, they're going to sell it because they want money. Also, we encourage that they stick to busy, well-lit road, avoid taking shortcuts and diverting. It's normally never safe and don't normally end up well. You want to talk to them about peer pressure and personal responsibility for their safety. Their safety doesn't only rest with the adult who is responsible or for taking care of them, it also rests with them. So they have to know that, look, my safety is my responsibility, and I need to do everything that is possible to ensure that I am safe at all times. And in the event I may come across a threat, I know what to do. And so you want to continue to sit them down and to encourage them and to give them guidelines and tips on how to keep themselves safe, what to do and what not to do while they're on the road and also at home. We spoke about the abductions earlier in the presentation, and since it's a very touchy topic and it has been prevalent these days, we're going to speak a little bit about it. So, how to prevent abductions? We want to set boundaries about places your kids go. So, they should know that look, these areas are off limit areas for them to go to. In Montego Bay, you have yeah, I see children used to gather at the library, just loitering there and stuff like that. And even though it's a library where kids go, most of the times their activities there are not condoning and should not be practiced. And so these kids are seen as set of idlers and stuff like that. Persons know that look, these kids are up to no good, they are in discipline and stuff like that. And most of the times they want to use the opportunity to carry out attacks against them. Kids who perhaps are using the library these days, who are about good business and stuff like that, they go into the libraries, they get out as quickly as possible, and they try and head home first thing that as they leave the library and get their homeworks or their research done. And so we want to tell them, look, limit the places that you go. These places are not safe places. These places are hotspot areas for kidnappings and abductions. And so you want to limit your exposure to these places. You also want to supervise them in places such as the malls. You go to the movie theater, you don't want them to be walking around by themselves while you're in the movie theater watching a movie. The parks and public bathrooms, we spoke of it earlier. You want to choose childcare providers and nannies carefully and check their references. Don't just have anybody come into your home because you desperately need the assistance because you have to go to work and stuff like that. So you're just gonna grab anybody that you get to come and care for your child. No, you have to check them out first. Get some recommendations about these persons, get into their background, read about them, investigate their background, see where they're from, try to find out what they are involved in and stuff like that. So in the event that someone is following them or someone tries to force them into a car, you must always tell them that look, try as best as possible to get away and just scream if someone is following them or trying to push them into a car, because what this does is it alerts everyone in the surrounding of whatever is happening, and they might be able to come to the rescue of that child. So you also want to provide supervision for the children who are at home. So you have trusted neighbors. You may not be able to be home with the child at all times. So you have trusted neighbor. Don't just go about and not telling your neighbor. Sister Pat, Chanel is over by the house by herself, just for a few. I'm running down the road. Bear in mind that this has to be a trusted neighbor, someone that you have a really good relationship with, because not all neighbors are good. And so you let them know that give an eye on Chanel and try to find out what exactly is happening with her during my absence. Anything that's happening that you may not consider to be safe or anything that is going out of the line, you might want to give me a call so I can rectify it. All right. So you want to use trusted means of transportation for these children. So at all times, you want to know the transportation and the persons for whom you are traveling with. You don't want to just go in any vehicle just like that. Most of the times, red plates is the preferred mode of transportation, but in some areas we understand that you don't normally have red plate vehicles, and so it poses a little bit of challenge. And even though red plates are the preferred choices for transportation, they are actually involved in the commission of abduction and stuff like that. Um, Most of the times when persons or children are being abducted, you normally find that there are also females involved. And so, when females see another female in the car, they might think it is safe, because that used to happen to me when I was traveling by public transportation. So I always feel safe. But at some point in the journey, you have the females coming off sometimes, and so you probably get a little bit scared. And you can tell your child that, look, even though it's not your final stop, you might come to a point where you no longer feel safe in the motor vehicle. Just get out. You can get out at that point and try to get another mode of transportation, and try to go home. So even though you are already in the cab, you can just stop it once the instinct tell you that, look, this is not safe for me. You might just want to stop it, and try to get another transportation to go home. All right. So as a parent, what you can, or guardian, here are some things that you can do if your child has been abducted. So the first few hours are what we call the golden hours, and these hours might reap success if we do what is necessary to broadcast the situation and to help to bring home the child. So it is considered the most critical hours in missing person cases. It is important to contact your local police and give them information about your child right away. Tell them about what your child was last wearing. Give them a physical description of the child. As soon as you can, you might want to visit the police station, provide them with a photograph so that this information can be sent to the CCU, which is the Constabulary Communications Unit, and they'll be able to broadcast the information officially on their website and on their social media platforms to assist with public information, and put the public on alert that in the event that they might see this child, it is to be reported. This child is missing, and you might want to call the authorities to get this child right away. After notifying the authorities, you want to stay calm. You'll be able to easily remember the details of a child's disappearance more easily if you do so. So even though it's your child, we know, and you are a bit disappointed, and you're a bit flustered, you're a bit angry, you don't know what to do, you're caught up in the moment, it is always recommended that you try and remain calm and try and remember all the occurrences leading up to your child's disappearance. You might remember that, look, he or she told you that she's gonna meet up with a particular friend, or whatever taxi that they were gonna travel in, and stuff like that. Those information might come back to you if you just try and remain calm in the event that your child has been abducted. So you can be able to provide the police with a sequence of activities, or the last sequence of activities that may possibly be a lead to locating your child. You might also want to use the social media to broadcast a missing child, and also alert community members. They might be able to provide details of the last time they saw your child, or whom, or the company for which the child was in, and perhaps the details of the transportation that your child took. So jumping right into sexual assault, also another touchy and prevalent offense committed against children. And as a parent, how you can protect your child from sexual assault is just by being involved in your child's life. You want to get to know them, get to know the persons who they are frequently around. You want to choose their caregivers carefully. Talk about social media and dating sites. This is a hub that they normally use these days to lure children to commit sexual offenses against them. They might gather photographs of children and stuff like that, send them to their phones, trick them into believing that if they don't meet with them, they will do certain things to them. And so you want to speak with your child that in the event stuff like this happen, don't be afraid. Just go ahead and share the information with your parents. So always try to be a confidant for your child. It is very important that your child have trust in you, and when it is that your child might share something with you, you don't want to get upset at the time, but try and find out ways in which you can positively work out that situation. All right. So you also want to know warning signs. You might, for young children, for young children, that is, you might want to, help them with their bath at times, for especially for females. And during bath time, they might, you know, have some kind of withdrawal and stuff like that, while perhaps while you're washing their private areas and stuff like that. And so this can be a trigger to know that something is wrong, something is happening. Perhaps their caregiver is assaulting them, perhaps the caregiver's son is assaulting them sexually. And so these might be some triggers, and you might want to just be aware of these warning signs, and you might happen to nip it in the bud from the get-go. All right. So you want to encourage your child to speak up, teach your child about boundaries, teach them how to talk about their bodies. You want to help them to build confidence about themselves. Whatever is affecting them, whatever is happening to them, let them be comfortable to share it to you, so you can get down to the nitty gritty of what's going on, and be available at all times to speak with them. Don't If they say, "Hey mommy, I have something to tell you," "Hey daddy, I have something to tell you," be a listening ear, be available, because that perhaps that time you want to you find that you're busy, then that child may no longer want to share the information with you, because he or she might feel as if you don't care. All right. So we also have a case of a child who is in need of care and protection. As adults in society, we are not only supposed to look out for our children only, and so it is also our responsibility to look out for the children of others, and we also have a responsibility to report abuse and mistreatment of children to proper authorities, that they can be placed into safe custody and taken care of. All right, so a child can be said to be in the need of care and protection in the following circumstances. One, when they have no parent or guardian, or having a parent or guardian who is unfit to exercise care and protection and guardianship over that child. Also, is being cared for in circumstances in which the child's physical or mental health, as well as emotional state of being, is seriously impaired, or there is substantial risk that it will be impaired. Also, is being exposed to moral danger. Wandering without any place of abode or without visible means of subsistence. Is a child against whom an offense has been committed or attempted to be committed. Is a child who is a member of a household within which an offense has been committed or attempted against another child. So if you are the neighbor of a child who has been abused, an offense has been committed against that child, it was not reported, the abuser is still within the household and stuff like that, and you know for a fact that, look, the likelihood of this happening again is very high, then it is your responsibility as an adult to try to protect that child by reporting it to the necessary authority. And there are confidential ways in which you can report information without having to identify yourself. So for citizens, there is a duty to protect, duty to report need of care and protection for children, and this is under the Child Care and Protection Act. We're seeing Section 6 of the Act, subsection 2. It states that any person who has information which causes that person to suspect that a child A has been, is being, or is likely to be abandoned, neglect, or physically or sexually ill-treated, or B, is otherwise in need of care and protection shall make a report to the Children's Registry. And it says in the Act, which is Section 4, that a person who contravenes to subsection 2 or subsection 3 commits an offence and shall be liable upon summary conviction in the RM court for a term not exceeding 6 months or to both such fine and imprisonment. So your responsibility to report cases of child abuse, child neglect, children being sexually and physically assaulted is great. And if it is that it's borne out, you are aware of these happenings within your surroundings and you have done nothing about it, then the law says that you can be held accountable for these things that has been happening to the child. So there are several organizations for dealing with the safety of children in Jamaica, and we have the Child Development Agency, but this has been renamed recently to the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA. It's the same organization, they just had a change of name, and this organization provides support to children in need of care and protection and those children who are at risk, and that's the cell phone number for that agency. Also, the Office of the Children Registry, which receives and records. They also assess and refer all cases of child abuse. Their contact number is listed also. We also have the Office of the Children's Advocate that provides assistance to children who want to make a complaint against a relevant authority that has infringed upon their rights. And so don't hesitate to contact especially the Child Protection and Family Service agencies whenever you see that a child has been abused or is being abused. Don't just sit back and not report it. It's important because you could actually save a child's life just by reporting the information, and you have confidential ways of reporting the information. You also can reach out to the police, someone that you perhaps might trust, have a relationship with, because I'm sure that in most families there is a police officer around, and so you can report it there and have it escalated to the relevant authorities for it to be dealt with. And so the information that I had presented you with earlier, these are some of the places that I took them from: the Child Care and Protection Act, Sexual Offences Act, and the Child Protection and Family Service Agency website. And I think this is the end of the presentation. I'm open for question at this time if you have any.
Thank you very much, Constable Woolery. Okay, we are opening the floor for questions from our audience. Any questions?
I do have a question. This is Anne-Marie. And it pertains, I know in the presentation, the presenter said that, we are to have that listening ear to for when our children wants to share with us, or we should encourage them to speak. But I just want to look at the same factor that oftentimes when they come forth and disclose what has happened, um, how do we deal with that shame factor in terms of getting them counseled as to not be embarrassed in, ensuring that the perpetrator is brought to the fore. Also, a lot of times these incidents, it takes place in the home where it's family members, and family have a way of guarding, like that close circle and say what goes on in the family, let us deal with it. How do we get past, those hurdles where we can ensure that justice is being served, where our children are protected even within our homes?
All right, I think those are two very good questions. But to answer the first question, um, the agency is responsible for dealing with children. I'm sure that they would have services and professionals set up to provide aftercare counseling for these victims. We also have the government also has a department known as the Victim Services Department. There is one in
Mm,
Montego Bay, situated at the Overton Plaza, and
mm,
there they have professional counselors who are trained in dealing with situations such as these, and they can bring forth moral support for these kids and encourage them as they go along, help them through the process mentally also. So we have avenues that these children might be able to get counseling, and it might assist them and helping them to not be ashamed of whatever had transpired to them. There should be therapy as well, because counseling is therapy, and so it should help. Most of the times it will help. For your second question, you spoke about protecting the children from perpetrators within the household. Majority of the times, children are being molested by their male parents, and most of the times the family is actually ashamed for this information to be brought out into the public. But again, you have to look out for the best interest of the child. So you have to encourage people, look, you have to look out for the best interest of your child, and also to note that once the information is brought to the police has the authority to act. So even though for in the case of an adult, then it depends. But for a child, the police has the authority to act, even though you might have persons want to withdraw from having to go through the court process. They have no say in it. Once an act or an offense is committed against a child, it's an offense that is committed against the state. And so um, household may they have no say in the matter being brought before the court. If that would probably answer your question as clearly as how I wanted to
yeah,
explain it.
you provided insightful info.
I'm not hearing you. I'm sorry. I'm not hearing you right now. You're coming across a little bit low.
Um, are you hearing me better now?
Hardly hearing you any better, but I'm gonna put the device closer to my ear so I can hear you. So go ahead.
Yeah. I was saying also the shame factor that one experiences too, um, in terms of what society brings on. So let's say I was abused or whatever, and it becomes public knowledge. So now every time I walk, somebody see the picnic over there. So where my father, the man, you see what I'm saying? So that is one of the hurdle that sometimes they keep it down because they don't want that trauma to follow the child throughout life. So how is that piece dealt with? And also another piece that I never asked. You are encouraging us as the public, especially a neighbor in the situation, to come forward. But
Um, I'm sorry. The latter part of it, I'm hardly hearing. I don't know what's happening, but what I can say, I heard something in your first comment. It says something about the child having to deal with the emotional trauma of having been a victim of abuse, especially by the parent or stuff like something to that effect. If
yes,
so, what I can say though is that it has been shown that majority of the times when children are being abused at an early stage, and proper channel and proper procedures are not done to ensure that these children are counseled the way they are supposed to, and you know reintegrated into society as the way they are supposed to through counseling, therapy, and one-on-one sessions. It normally affects them later on in their life. It helps them to make poor decisions as it relates to relationships going forward, and stuff like that. So I think that though it might be a challenge for them to open up and to go on or follow through with the process of having to go through court and be feel publicly ashamed, in my opinion, I think it would have been better, but because they didn't commit the crime against themselves. They are the victim. Someone did that to them. And so this must be embedded into them that look, there's nothing to be ashamed of, right? Because you are the victim here. You didn't commit an offense against yourself. There is no way you could have perhaps, based on the situation, there is no way you could have perhaps prevented this from happening to you. And what we can do is, because I think society has been adopting and changing a little bit. I think there needs to be a little bit more education in that regard, where we go out and we educate persons as to, you know, how to deal with persons who are victims of certain traumas, because certain things and certain comments might affect them in the latter end. And so it has to do with education and sensitization of the general population.
Beautiful. I think that piece answers it, is that public awareness that you say, because if I am gonna be walking and somebody is pointing at me that she's the one who this happened to, that I think my
Yes,
self-esteem is torn. So yeah, I want to know that the agency has something in place now to rebuild my self-esteem,
yes,
that I can now not feel guilty and ashamed, that so yes, you did answer it. And the latter one that I was saying is the fact that you're saying this mandatory reporting. Like if I know that this is happening, but what I'm
mm-hmm.
saying, we are now in a toxic culture where retribution will come at you
Mm-hmm.
because you would have, and I'm saying, how can you expect
I'm sorry,
yeah, that if I come forward, I am protected, because
I'm,
yeah, so
I'm
that
sorry,
is.
I'm having a really hard time. I apologize. You said something about the culture and retribution.
Yeah, because of if I, in the interest of protecting my neighbor's child, I come
Right.
forward the info, but because of whatever I divulge, they will now suspect that it must be somebody close around here who knows all of that pertinent detail. So now I can be targeted. So that would want to cause me not to come up front to disclose anything, because I am fearful that my life is in danger.
Definitely, definitely. And I agree with you 100% that persons might be fearful when it comes on to providing information about children who might be abused, because they fear that they might become a victim of crime themselves. And so we have to find creative way of doing it. As I said before, we can just, we can find someone that we can speak with confidentially. Um, that person might use creative means and creative ways into getting information and getting access to the area where the abuse is being committed, without having to display anything to say that look, this information has to be passed on by somebody else. So we also can find creative ways as to try to carry out some investigation and stuff like that, to let it appear as though that it is an investigation of our own. We're doing house to house visits or so forth. And we even check the neighbors as well, to just to help to get rid of all these suspicions that the accusers might have of neighbors and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. I see Dr. Graham had her hand up and then Karen Davis. So Dr. Graham, you may go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon and good evening rather, and thanks to the presenters and all the persons who have joined. I wanted to just get your opinion on a scenario that I was made aware of. There is a child, who's probably about 9, 10 years old, male, who always a walk up and down a road, a beg people things, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Anyway, some of the persons in the community were concerned. They had reported it to CPSFA, and for months and months, nothing happened until finally we missed him. He was missed out of the community. And when we asked, we told he was taken to a boys' home in Clarendon.
Mm-hmm.
However, I am being told now by some persons that he has been cited in the community again in recent times, and that somebody said I think him run away from
Right.
from the boys' home in Clarendon.
Mm-hmm.
And when they spoke to the father said he brought him to the police station and it's okay for him to stay. How do the concerned citizens, is there any way to validate whether the father just make up something saying can go police station if there is still considered missing from the boys' home because it's in Clarendon and he's in Westmoreland? Is there any way for them to validate that what the true status is for this child?
Right. Because what I'm thinking though is that you might don't want to take the father's information for it. So even if he says one thing, then that might not be the truth. Because majority of the time you have parents who, even though their child has been undergoing certain conditions and certain situations, they really don't want them to be in state care. And so they will do anything possible to get them out of state care or to prevent them from having to go back into state care. And so perhaps what he spoke about as it relates to having gone to the police station with the child and stuff like that, it may not be the truth, may not be the truth, you know, because while the child was in state care and stuff like that, the police should have done some form of investigation and to perhaps contact the facility that the child was at to find out what's the status of this child. Was it a case where he was sent off after spending some time with them, or it's a case where he left the compound without permission? And so when things like this happen, we as a concerned community, we can try and, you know, find out more information. We can try and speak to the community safety and security branch of the division and you know, have them investigate the matter. The community safety and security branch can reach out to the boys home. They work closely with the CPFSA, and so we can, you know, work together, get some more information as to the true status of this child. And so what needs to be done, we can have it done, whether it is that the child needs to be placed back into state custody or the child was released to the parent. Then it's something that CPFSA in their judgment then would have been a part of, and the decision was made at that time, or perhaps the court has made that decision.
Okay, so they can contact the Savannah police then if they're in Westmoreland for the community safety and security branch.
Definitely, definitely, definitely they can do that. And the community safety and security branch should follow up with, if they have the name of the location that the child was staying at the time, for example, a specific name of the boys' home that he was at. Because I myself had reached out to several places of safety for children just to get some information on children, details of what their status and what has been happening and stuff like that. So I'm sure that they'll be able to assist the community in reaching out in the best interest of the child. Everyone has a duty to ensure that a child is safe and is being protected at all times.
But what if the community doesn't know which boys home was in Clarendon? Would the CPSF
If they might have an idea, right? They might have an idea because I think they have a database there where they have the names of children that might come into their institution or their facility that they might have, you know, been in contact with. And so perhaps there's a file that they can tell you exactly what had happened with that child.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions from our audience?
No.
Okay, So if there are no further questions, I just want to say, Constable Woolery, thank you very much for this very informative session that you held or that you presented to us. We would have gotten insights on and tips on how to better keep our children safe, especially in these times, and the role that we have to play as parents and community members. So thank you very much for coming on this evening and to speaking to our audience. We truly appreciate it. Thank you to our audience members for joining. Really appreciate the support on this platform. So if there are no further questions and if we have no other comments, Constable Woolery, again, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining. It is now 10 minutes after 7.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure speaking with you guys today.
Thank you very much. All right, so it's now 10 minutes after 7 o'clock, so we are officially adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone, and God bless.
All right.
Okay.